The rain poured relentlessly, pounding against the windows of the dimly lit roadside diner. Inside, Tom sat nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, his mind weighed down by unpaid bills and the struggles of raising his young son alone. Just as he was about to leave, a faint cry caught his attention. Turning toward the sound, he saw her, a small, frightened toddler huddled in the corner, abandoned and alone. In that moment, Tom's world shifted. He had no idea that this one act of kindness would set in motion a chain of events that would change his life forever. Before we dive further into this incredible tale of fate and kindness, let me ask, where are you listening from tonight? I'd love to know who's joining me on this journey. Rain pelted the windshield and sheets, transforming the dark highway into a blur of headlights and neon signs. Tom's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. His eyes burned from 12 hours of staring at spreadsheets, the numbers still dancing behind his tired lids. The car's wipers squeaked across the glass, fighting a losing battle against the downpour. A flash of lightning illuminated a weather-beaten sign, May's Diner, open 24/7. Tom's stomach growled, reminding him he'd skipped lunch again to cover for a sick co-worker. The diner's windows glowed like a beacon through the storm. He pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, tires crunching over loose gravel. Water dripped from his jacket as he made a dash for the entrance, the bell above the door announcing his arrival with a tired chime. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell of coffee and grilled onions hung in the air. An elderly waitress wiped down the counter with practiced circles, barely glancing up as Tom slid onto a cracked vinyl stool. "Coffee, hun?" The waitress's name tag read Barbara. "Please." Tom rubbed his face. "And whatever's hot." A soft whimper caught his attention. At first he thought it was just the wind outside, but there it was again, definitely coming from inside the diner. Tom turned on his stool. In the far corner booth, partially hidden behind a metal napkin dispenser, sat a small child. The toddler couldn't have been more than 2 years old, wearing mismatched pajamas and clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. Tears streaked the little one's reddened cheeks. How long has that child been here? Tom's coffee sat forgotten. Barbara's cloth stilled. Found the poor thing about an hour ago. No sign of parents. She lowered her voice. Sheriff's deputy came by, but they're stretched thin with accidents from the storm. Said they'd send someone when they could. The toddler hiccuped, fresh tears welling up. Tom slid off his stool. His own daughter Emma's face flashed in his mind. She'd be waiting at his mother's house, probably already asleep. The familiar guilt of another late night twisted in his chest. He approached the booth slowly, keeping his movements gentle. Hey there, little one. Tom crouched down to eye level. That's quite a nice rabbit you've got. The child clutched the stuffed animal tighter, but met his gaze with wide brown eyes. I'm Tom. He smiled, remembering how he used to comfort Emma during thunderstorms. Would you like to tell me your name? The toddler's lower lip trembled. Sam. Nice to meet you, Sam. Tom glanced at Barbara. Has Sam had anything to eat? The waitress shook her head. Wouldn't take anything from me. Tom spotted a children's menu with crayons. He slid into the booth, maintaining a careful distance. You know what I love when it's rainy? Chocolate milk and pancakes. Would you like that, Sam? Sam's grip on the rabbit loosened slightly, a tiny nod. Barbara, Tom called over his shoulder, could we get some chocolate milk and a short stack? Extra whipped cream? The toddler's eyes followed Barbara as she disappeared into the kitchen. Another crack of thunder made Sam jump. It's okay. Tom pulled a crayon from the holder. Want to draw while we wait? I bet your rabbit would make a great art critic. A ghost of a smile crossed Sam's face. Tom pushed the paper closer, and small fingers reached for a red crayon. As Sam drew wobbly circles, Tom studied the child's appearance. The pajamas were clean but wrinkled. No coat despite the cold. His chest tightened at the implications. Barbara returned with the chocolate milk. Sam wrapped both hands around the plastic cup, taking careful sips. Any luck reaching anyone? Tom asked quietly. Barbara shook her head. Deputies said they'd check security footage when they get here. No cars stopped long enough to see who might have... She trailed off, jaw tightening. Tom watched Sam color, thoughts racing. His own life was a juggling act of overtime and daycare payments. But the thought of leaving this child alone in a strange diner during a storm, his fingers curled into fists under the table. "I'll stay," he said, "until the police arrive." Barbara's weathered face softened. "You're a good man, Tom." The pancakes arrived, steam rising from the perfect golden circles. Tom cut them into small bites, making sure they weren't too hot. "Look, Sam, your rabbit can help us taste test." Tom pretended to feed the stuffed animal. "Mr. Rabbit says they're delicious." Sam giggled, a small, precious sound that cut through the storm's rumble. The child picked up a fork with clumsy determination. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside May's diner, a frightened toddler began to feel safe again, one bite of pancake at a time. Thunder cracked outside as Tom helped Sam into his jacket. The fabric swallowed the small frame, but at least it would keep the child warm until they reached the police station. "Ready for a little adventure?" Tom knelt down, zipping up the front. "We're going to meet some nice people who will help us find your family." Sam clutched the stuffed rabbit closer. "Scared." "I know." Tom smoothed down the jacket's collar. "But I'll stay with you, okay?" Barbara appeared with a paper bag. "Made some sandwiches, in case you get hungry later, sweetie." The drive to the police station took longer than usual, Tom keeping well under the speed limit through the storm. In the rearview mirror, he watched Sam drift in and out of sleep, head bobbing against the borrowed car seat Barbara had pulled from her garage. The station's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the empty lobby. A desk sergeant looked up from his computer, eyes widening at the sight of Tom carrying the sleeping toddler. "This is Sam." Tom kept his voice low. "Found abandoned at May's Diner about 3 hours ago." The sergeant picked up his phone. "Detective Martinez, got that child from the diner case here." Minutes stretched like hours in the hard plastic chairs. Sam stirred, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings with growing anxiety. "Hey, look what I found." Tom pulled his phone from his pocket, opening a game with colorful shapes. "Want to help me match these?" Sam leaned against his arm, small finger pointing at the screen. "Blue one." Detective Martinez arrived with a social worker, Ms. Chen, according to her ID badge. They spoke in hushed tones while Sam continued tapping at shapes. "No reports of missing children matching the description," Martinez said. "We're checking surrounding counties." Miss Chen crouched down. "Hi, Sam. I'm Lucy. Would you like to come with me? We have a special room with lots of toys." Sam's grip on Tom's sleeve tightened. "It's okay." Tom gently untangled the small fingers. "Lucy's going to take good care of you." His throat constricted as he watched Sam disappear down the hallway with Miss Chen. The stuffed rabbit's ear dragged along the floor. "Sir?" Martinez pulled out a notepad. "Need your statement." Tom recounted finding Sam at the diner, each detail making his chest ache. When he finished, Martinez closed his notebook with a grim expression. "Security footage shows a dark sedan pulling up around 8 p.m. Woman goes in with the child, orders coffee, then leaves alone 10 minutes later. No clear shot of the license plate." Tom's hands clenched. "What happens to Sam now?" "Emergency foster placement tonight. Then we'll work on identifying the child and locating family." The words emergency foster placement echoed in Tom's head. He thought of Emma's room at home, filled with stuffed animals and picture books. "Wait here." Tom rushed out to his car, returning with a cardboard box from his trunk. Inside were some of Emma's old toys he'd meant to donate. A soft blanket, building blocks, a few board books. "Could you give these to Sam?" He pushed the box across the desk. "The blanket still smells like lavender detergent. Might help, being somewhere new tonight." Martinez's expression softened. "Of course." Miss Chen reappeared, now holding a clipboard of forms. Sam settled in the playroom. "We've got a wonderful foster family on standby." "Can I say goodbye?" She led him to a room painted in cheerful yellows and blues. Sam sat at a small table, coloring with fresh crayons. "Hey, buddy." Tom knelt down. "I brought you some special things for your sleepover tonight." He pulled out the blanket first, wrapping it around Sam's shoulders. The building blocks clattered onto the table. "Look, you can make towers even taller than your rabbit." Tom stacked a few, letting them topple to demonstrate. Sam giggled, reaching for a red block. The nice people here will take good care of you. Tom's voice cracked. Maybe we'll see each other again sometime. Sam looked up, brown eyes serious. Promise? Tom swallowed hard. I promise to think about you and hope you find a wonderful family who'll love you very much. He stood, legs heavy as lead. At the doorway, he turned back one last time. Sam had already started building, the lavender blanket trailing like a cape. Outside, the storm had passed. Tom sat in his car, key in the ignition, but couldn't bring himself to start it. The image of Sam alone in that diner booth kept replaying in his mind. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother about Emma asking for him at bedtime. Reality crashed back. He had his own child to care for, bills to pay, overtime to work. But as he pulled away from the station, Tom knew a piece of his heart would always wonder about the toddler with the stuffed rabbit who'd appeared in his life for one rainy night. Tom drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, waiting at the group home's security gate. 3 weeks had passed since that stormy night, but Sam's face haunted his thoughts daily. The intercom crackled. Can I help you? Tom Fletcher, here to see Sam, the child brought in from May's Diner last month? A buzz, then the gate swung open. Ms. Chen met him at the entrance, surprise evident in her expression. Mr. Fletcher, this is unexpected. I brought some more books. He hefted a canvas bag, and wondered if I could check how Sam's doing. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Follow me. The common room buzzed with activity. Kids sprawled on couches, playing board games, doing homework. In the corner, Sam sat alone, still clutching that stuffed rabbit. Look who came to visit, Miss Chen called out. Sam's head snapped up. Recognition flickered, then a smile brighter than sunshine spread across the small face. Tom! Sam barreled into his legs. Hey, buddy! Tom's throat tightened. Brought you something. They settled on a worn beanbag. Sam crawled into his lap as he pulled out Where the Wild Things Are. This was my daughter Emma's favorite. Tom opened to the first page. Want to hear it? Sam nodded, leaning back against his chest. The familiar words flowed, bringing Max's wild rumpus to life. Other kids drifted closer, drawn by the story. Again? Sam asked when he finished. How about this one instead? Tom produced Harold and the Purple Crayon. 2 books later, Miss Chen appeared. Sam, time for dinner. Can Tom stay? She shook her head. Visiting hours are almost over. Sam's face fell. Tom quickly pulled out the last book. Here's one for bedtime. Maybe I can come read more next week. Promise? Promise. True to his word, Tom returned the following Thursday. Then the Thursday after that, he rearranged his work schedule, taking later shifts to free up afternoons. Uncle Tom, Sam's greeting became a weekly highlight. They built block towers, colored pictures, played endless games of Connect 4. Tom learned Sam loved strawberry milk but hated peas, could spend hours stacking cups, and always wanted just one more story. My Emma asked about you, Tom mentioned one day, helping Sam with a puzzle. She's 7. Maybe sometime you two could meet. Sam carefully placed a piece. She likes puzzles too? And stuffed animals, especially bunnies. The next visit, Tom brought Emma. The girls hit it off immediately, heads bent together over coloring books. Daddy, can Sam come to my birthday? Emma asked on the drive home. Tom glanced in the rearview mirror. I'll ask Ms. Chen. The birthday party permission came through. Tom picked Sam up early Saturday morning. The small hand gripped as tightly during the walk to his car. First time out of the home? He guessed. Sam nodded. Well, we've got a very special day planned. Emma's turning 8. The party transformed his backyard into a fairy wonderland. Sam stuck close to Tom initially, overwhelmed by the noise and new faces. But Emma's infectious excitement soon drew Sam into the games. Uncle Tom, Sam called from the bounce house. Look! Tom's heart swelled at the title. He watched Sam jump with the other kids, finally looking like any other carefree child. More visits followed. Sam joined their weekend park trips, movie nights, simple dinners of mac and cheese. Tom's mother knitted Sam a sweater to match Emma's. You're good with them both, Miss Chen remarked one afternoon. Tom looked up from where he sat cross-legged on the floor, Sam and Emma taking turns braiding his hair. They make it easy, she smiled. Sam asks for you on non-visiting days. Keeps your pictures by the bed. Tom's chest tightened. He'd seen the collection. Crayon drawings of their outings, Polaroids from Emma's party, all carefully taped to the wall. Done, Emma declared, stepping back to admire her handiwork. Sam giggled. You look pretty, Uncle Tom. Why, thank you. He stood, tiny braids sticking out at odd angles. Who's ready for ice cream? Two hands shot up instantly. Later, dropping Sam back at the home, small arms wrapped around his waist. Love you, Uncle Tom. He hugged back, throat too tight for words. In just a few months, this scared little toddler had carved out a permanent place in his heart. Love you too, kiddo, he finally managed. See you Thursday? Sam beamed. Promise? Promise. The mounting bills spread across Tom's kitchen table told a harsh story. Medical expenses from Emma's broken arm, car repairs, rising rent. The numbers blurred together into an overwhelming sum. His phone buzzed. A text from his boss. Need you to cover Mike's shift tonight. Tom's shoulders slumped. Today was Thursday, visiting day. He glanced at the clock. Maybe if he rushed. Dad? Emma appeared in the doorway, arm still in its cast. Aren't we going to see Sam? He rubbed his face. Not today, honey. I have to work. But you promised. I know, I'll make it up next week. Except next week brought more overtime. Then a school conference. Then Emma's doctor appointments. One missed Thursday turned into two, then three. His calls to the group home grew shorter, less frequent. Sam asks about you, Ms. Chen said during one brief conversation. Guilt gnawed at his insides. I'm trying. I understand. Life gets complicated. The visits dwindled to monthly, then bi-monthly. Each time, Sam's initial excitement seemed more subdued, more guarded. Where were you? Sam asked during one visit, voice small. Work's been crazy. Tom pulled out a new book. But look what I brought. Jenny's parents visit every week. Sam traced patterns on the floor. Even when they're busy. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Emma noticed too. Dad, why don't we see Sam as much anymore? He had no good answer. Then came the call that changed everything. Ms. Chen's voice carried a mix of joy and hesitation. Sam's being adopted. A family from Oregon. The world tilted sideways. Oregon? They're wonderful people. Two moms, both teachers. They've been fostering for years. When? They're finalizing paperwork now, probably moving within the month. Tom sat heavily in his kitchen chair. A month? After nearly 2 years of weekly visits turned sporadic, just a month. He made it to the group home that weekend. Sam's room was half-packed, belongings sorted into neat piles. My new moms have a dog, Sam told him, showing off photos, and a big backyard. That's great, buddy. The words stuck in his throat. Sam studied him. Will you visit in Oregon? They both knew the answer. On his salary with Emma's needs, cross-country trips weren't possible. I'll write, he promised instead, and we can video chat. Sam nodded, but something had shifted. The goodbye, when it came, felt final. Thank you, Sam whispered into his shirt, for being my uncle. Tom held on tight, memorizing the feel of small arms around his waist. I'll always be your uncle. Don't forget that. But life had other plans. The first few video calls were awkward, stilted. Letters went unanswered. Sam's new life filled with soccer practice, piano lessons, friends. Tom kept Sam's drawings in a box under his bed. Sometimes late at night, he'd pull them out. Crayon stick figures holding hands. Uncle Tom written in wobbly letters. Do you think Sam's happy? Emma asked occasionally. I hope so, sweetheart. He'd pull her close. I really hope so. Years passed, the drawings faded, but on quiet nights when rain drummed against his windows, Tom's mind would drift back to that stormy evening at May's Diner, to a frightened child in need of comfort, to Thursday afternoons filled with stories and laughter. He never stopped wondering, Never stopped praying that somewhere in Oregon, Sam had found the family, the stability, the joy that he couldn't provide. Tom's hand trembled as he set down the medical report. The words blurred together, but a few phrases stood out in stark relief. Stage 3, aggressive treatment needed. Immediate intervention required. The oncologist's office felt too bright, too sterile. We need to start chemotherapy next week, Mr. Harrison. Tom cleared his throat. My insurance. Dr. Morris's expression softened. There are payment plans available. Payment plans. Tom almost laughed. His disability checks barely covered rent and utilities. Outside, autumn leaves skittered across the parking lot. He sat in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel, until the sun dipped below the horizon. Emma called that evening. Dad, how was the appointment? Fine, honey, just some tests. The lie tasted bitter. How's the baby? Michael's teething. Listen, Jack and I were thinking of visiting next month. No, you've got your hands full. He couldn't burden her with this, not when she'd finally built her own life 3 states away. The first round of chemo hit like a freight train. Tom spent days hunched over the toilet, too weak to stand. Mrs. Peterson from next door brought soup. You need anything, Tom? He shook his head, managing a weak smile. Just under the weather. But word spread in their small town. Pastor Mike stopped by with casseroles. The ladies from the hardware store where he'd worked sent cards. Let us help, they insisted. Tom accepted their kindness with burning shame. Pride had always been his anchor. Working 2 jobs when Emma was young, never asking for handouts. The medical bills arrived like clockwork, each envelope thicker than the last. He started sorting them into piles. Urgent, more urgent, critical. His landlord, Pete, found him passed out in the hallway after a particularly rough treatment. Jesus, Tom. Pete helped him inside. Why didn't you say something? Nothing to say? Tom sank into his threadbare armchair. Nothing anyone can do. Pete ran a hand through his gray hair. I can give you a break on rent. No, Tom's voice cracked. You've got your own family. The town organized a fundraiser at May's Diner, the same place where, decades ago, he'd found a crying child on a stormy night. The irony wasn't lost on him. They raised $800, a drop in the ocean of his mounting debt. We're here for you, they said. But good intentions couldn't pay for chemotherapy, couldn't stop the collection notices, couldn't fill the gnawing emptiness when he lay awake at night, wondering how many more treatments he could afford. His hair fell out in clumps. The face in the mirror became a stranger's, hollow-cheeked, gray-skinned. The disability office lost his paperwork. Twice. Each delay meant more bills unpaid, more sleepless nights. Emma's calls grew more worried. You sound different, Dad. Just tired, sweetheart. I could take some time off work. No, he forced steel into his voice. You focus on that grandbaby of mine. After particularly bad days, he'd pull out the old box of Sam's drawings. The colors had faded, but the memories remained sharp, of a time when helping others felt possible, when hope came easier. The town's generosity had limits. Good people with their own struggles, their own bills to pay. Their sympathy remained genuine, but their ability to help dwindled. Tom started selling things. His TV. Emma's old bicycle he'd kept in the garage. His father's watch. Each sale bought another week of treatment, another handful of pills, another round of nausea and pain. The cancer didn't care about empty bank accounts or small-town kindness. It grew, spreading through his body like poison ivy through a garden. Some nights he'd sit on his front porch, watching the stars, remembering Thursday afternoons spent reading stories to a foster child, wondering if perhaps he'd used up all his luck back then, doing that one good thing. His neighbors still brought food, the church still prayed, but their eyes held a growing helplessness, watching him fade away with no solution in sight. The medical bills continued to arrive, piling up like autumn leaves on his kitchen table, each one a reminder of how far he'd fallen, how alone he truly was. Tom slouched in the hard plastic chair of the oncology ward's waiting room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across faded magazines and empty coffee cups. Mr. Harrison? A nurse gestured toward the consultation room. Dr. Carter will see you now. His joints creaked as he stood. The chemo had carved away what little meat remained on his bones. The doctor's office smelled of antiseptic and fresh coffee. A woman in her early 30s sat behind the desk, dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked up from his file, and something in her eyes made Tom's breath catch. I'm Dr. Emily Carter. She extended her hand. I'll be overseeing your treatment moving forward. Tom shook her hand, fighting an odd sense of déjà vu. Those eyes, warm brown with flecks of gold. He'd seen them somewhere before. Your previous scans show the tumor's progression has... Dr. Carter trailed off, studying his face. I'm sorry, but have we met before? Don't think so. Tom shifted in his chair. Though you remind me of someone. Can't place who. She smiled and another memory tugged at him. A child's gap-toothed grin from long ago. Let's discuss your treatment options. Dr. Carter pulled up his scans on her computer. The current protocol isn't achieving the results we'd hoped for. Tom's shoulders slumped. Can't afford more aggressive treatment anyway. There's a clinical trial that might... She paused, noticing his expression. Mr. Harrison, money shouldn't determine whether you live or die. Tell that to my bank account. He attempted a weak laugh. Dr. Carter set down her pen. You worked at Mitchell's Hardware, right? Before you got sick? 23 years. Pride crept into his voice. Until the diagnosis. Small town. She smiled again. Everyone knows everyone. Tom studied her face. Something about her mannerisms. The way she tilted her head when listening. The nurses tell me you never complain. Dr. Carter leaned forward. Even on your worst days, you're asking how they're doing. Heat crept up his neck. Just being polite. They also mentioned you gave your hospital dinner to old Mr. Jenkins last week. Said he looked hungry. Man's got no family visiting. Tom shrugged. Missed lunch that day. Dr. Carter's eyes softened. Some things never change, do they? The phrase hung in the air between them. Tom's head snapped up, but she'd already turned back to his file. I'm going to adjust your medication schedule. She scribbled notes in his chart. And I want to run some additional tests. Tom's protest died on his lips as she raised her hand. Don't worry about the cost. Not yet. Let's focus on getting you better first. She walked him through the new treatment plan, her voice steady and reassuring. Tom found himself nodding along, that nagging sense of familiarity growing stronger. At the door, she touched his arm. Mr. Harrison, thank you. For what? For being exactly who you are. She smiled, and for a moment, Tom saw a shadow of someone else in her face, a small, frightened child from a rainy night long ago. But before he could grasp the memory, it slipped away like smoke through his fingers. Tom returned the following week for more tests. The halls of the oncology ward had become familiar territory. Each scuff on the linoleum, each crack in the ceiling tiles marked another step in his journey. Dr. Carter's office door stood open. She sat at her desk surrounded by stacks of medical files. Her fingers traced lines of text, brow furrowed in concentration. Come in, Mr. Harrison. She didn't look up. Just reviewing your records. Tom eased into the chair, joints protesting. More bad news? Actually, She stopped, her hand frozen mid-page turn. Color drained from her face. Doctor, you okay? Her fingers trembled against the paper. Thomas James Harrison, born in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. That's me. He leaned forward. Something wrong? Dr. Carter's breath caught. She pulled another file from her drawer, this one older, its edges worn. You worked at Mitchell's Hardware since 1999. Before that, you drove trucks for Patterson Logistics. How'd you know about Patterson's? That was decades ago. She spread both files on her desk. December 15th, 2003. You stopped at Mel's Diner during a thunderstorm. The memory hit Tom like a physical blow. Rain hammering the roof, coffee going cold, a child's cry from the corner. There was a little girl, he whispered. Dr. Carter's voice cracked. She was wearing a purple coat, too big for her. Second hand. Tom gripped the arms of his chair. How could you possibly... You gave her your sandwich. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Turkey on rye. cut into triangles. Emily? The name fell from his lips like a prayer. She nodded, unable to speak. But you're a doctor. You're... Tom's vision blurred. The foster home, the adoption, I lost track. The Carters adopted me when I was 7. She wiped her eyes with trembling fingers. They gave me everything. Education, opportunities, love. But I never forgot. Forgot what? The man who saved me that night, who visited every chance he could, even when he was exhausted from work. She pulled open another drawer, withdrew a battered stuffed rabbit. Who gave me this, saying everyone needs a friend? Tom's heart stuttered. Mr. Hoppy? You remember his name? Fresh tears fell. Course I do. Bought him at the drugstore. Only thing they had left near closing. Tom's throat tightened. You kept him. He got me through med school. She clutched the rabbit to her chest. Through residency. Through every hard night when I thought I couldn't make it. All this time, Tom's voice roughened. I wondered what happened to that little girl. If she was happy, safe. I tried finding you after the adoption. Dr. Carter, Emily, reached across the desk, took his hand. The diner had closed. The trucking company changed hands. Nobody knew where you'd gone. I'm right here. Tom squeezed her fingers. Been here all along. Still helping people. She smiled through her tears. Still giving away your dinner to strangers. Tom shrugged, embarrassed. Old habits. Uncle Tom. The childhood nickname made them both laugh. You know what I remember most? How you'd sit and read to me at the foster home, even when you could barely keep your eyes open. Green eggs and ham, Tom grinned. You knew every word. But I still made you read it. She set Mr. Hoppy on her desk. Again and again. Best audience I ever had. Emily stood, walked around her desk. Without hesitation, she wrapped her arms around Tom's thin shoulders. Thank you, she whispered, for everything, for being there when no one else was. Tom hugged her back, careful of his IV port. Look at you now, Dr. Carter, saving lives. Because someone showed me what kindness looks like. She pulled back, wiped her eyes. Someone taught me that family isn't always blood. Emily paced her kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. Coffee grew cold on the counter, forgotten in her excitement. Yes, Dr. Matthews, that's right. The man who saved me as a child. She grabbed a notepad, scribbled furiously. You'll help spread the word? Thank you. Yes, I'll email you the details. Her laptop screen glowed with spreadsheets and half-written emails. 3 days since discovering Tom's identity, and she hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night. The medical bills spread across her coffee table told a stark story. Numbers that could crush a man's spirit. Not this time, she muttered, typing faster. Her doorbell rang. Sarah from next door bustled in, arms full of poster board and markers. Got everything you asked for. Sarah dumped the supplies on Emily's dining table. The church hall's booked for Saturday. Pastor Jim's spreading the word. You're amazing, Emily hugged her friend. How's the food situation? Half the neighborhood's cooking. Mrs. Rodriguez is making 3 kinds of enchiladas. The Chen family's handling desserts. Sarah grabbed a marker, started sketching layouts. How's Tom taking all this? He doesn't know yet, Emily bit her lip. I want it to be a surprise. Emily Carter, you sneaky thing, Sarah grinned. Speaking of surprises, guess who called? Channel 7 News. They want to cover the story. Emily's phone buzzed, another text from the hospital's charitable foundation. The board approved matching donations. She showed Sarah the message. Up to $50,000. God, Em. Sarah wiped her eyes. This is really happening. He saved my life. Emily's voice caught. Not just that night at the diner. Every visit, every story he read me. He showed me I mattered, that someone cared. The week flew by in a blur of preparations. Emily's colleagues pooled resources, coordinated with local businesses. The story spread through social media, touching hearts across town. Saturday morning dawned clear and cool. Emily arrived at the church hall early, heart racing. Balloons go there. She pointed volunteers toward the stage. Food tables along that wall. Silent auction items need price sheets. People streamed in, carrying casseroles and donation envelopes. The local coffee shop sent urns of fresh brew. A bakery delivered boxes of pastries. The high school jazz band set up in the corner. Dr. Carter? A teenager approached, camera in hand. I'm from the school paper. Could I interview you? Later, sweetie. Emily checked her watch. He'll be here soon. She'd told Tom they were having a small gathering, just a few friends from the hospital. Nothing more. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Emily turned. Tom stood in the doorway, leaning on his cane. His eyes widened at the sea of faces. Banners hung from the rafters. Thank you, Tom Harrison, and heroes come in all forms. What? He swallowed hard. Emily, what is this? She took his arm, steadying him. This is your community, Tom. These are all the lives you've touched. People stepped forward one by one. The checker from Mitchell's Hardware, remembering how Tom had helped her son with math homework during lunch breaks. A former neighbor whose pipes Tom had fixed in the middle of winter, refusing payment. Mrs. Rodriguez pressed a container of enchiladas into his hands. For all the times you shoveled my walk without being asked. The Chen family's youngest daughter hugged his legs. Remember when you found my kitten? She still lives with us. Tom's hands shook. I don't understand. Emily led him to a table covered in cards and envelopes. These are donations. For your medical bills. She squeezed his fingers. The whole town wanted to help. But, he stared at the pile, I never asked. You never had to ask. Emily's voice carried across the suddenly quiet room. 20 years ago, you saw a scared little girl and stopped to help. You didn't ask then either. You just did what was right. The high school band started playing softly. People gathered closer. That little girl grew up wanting to be just like you. Emily wiped her eyes. Not just a doctor, someone who makes the world better, one small kindness at a time. Tom sank into a chair, overwhelmed. The local news crew filmed quietly from the corner as more people came forward with stories, memories, donations. The hospital foundation's matching everything, Emily told him. And look, she handed him a stack of papers. Online donations from across the state, messages from strangers touched by his story. This is too much. Tom's voice cracked. I don't deserve. Yes, you do. The words came from dozens of voices. The room filled with applause, with tears, with love. Emily knelt beside his chair. You taught me that family isn't always blood. Well, this is your family, Tom. All these people whose lives are better because you're in them. Tom looked around the packed hall, at faces young and old, at hands reaching out to help, at hearts opening wide. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you all. The band played on. Food was shared, stories flowed, and in that church hall, surrounded by the community he'd served so quietly for so long, Tom Harrison finally understood that no kindness goes unnoticed, no good deed unfelt, no love unreturned. Tom's hospital room brightened as Emily pushed open the curtains. Morning sunlight spilled across the sterile white sheets, catching the silver in Tom's hair. How's my favorite patient? She checked his IV line, movements precise yet gentle. Better than yesterday. Tom shifted in bed, color returning to his cheeks. Those new meds are working wonders. Your blood work shows improvement. Emily adjusted his pillows. The treatment's responding exactly as we hoped. Thanks to you. Tom caught her hand. Not just the medical stuff, everything. Emily pulled up her usual chair, the one she'd claimed during her daily visits. Remember that book you used to read me? The one about the rabbit family? The Velveteen Chronicles. Tom's eyes crinkled. You wouldn't sleep without hearing at least 2 chapters. You did all the voices, Emily laughed. Mrs. Cottontail had this ridiculous British accent. Hey, I worked hard on that accent. Tom pressed a hand to his chest in mock offense. Shakespeare himself would have been proud. More like Monty Python. Emily reached into her bag. Look what I found at a used bookstore. She pulled out a worn hardcover, its spine cracked, pages yellowed. The familiar rabbit family smiled from the cover. Tom's breath caught. That's the same edition. Read to me? Emily held out the book. For old time's sake? Aren't you supposed to be my doctor? Right now, I'm just Emily. She opened to chapter 1. Please? Tom took the book, fingers tracing the familiar words. His voice, though weaker than before, found its rhythm in the beloved story. Emily closed her eyes, transported back to foster care visits, to the safety of Tom's presence, to the magic he'd woven with words. You always fell asleep right here. Tom paused mid-chapter. Every single time. I was testing your dedication. Emily opened one eye, grinning. Had to make sure you'd finish the story even if I dozed off. Sneaky kid. Tom ruffled her hair like he used to. Some things never change. A nurse poked her head in. Time for physical therapy, Mr. Harrison. Already? Emily checked her watch. I'll walk with you. She helped Tom into the wheelchair, movements practiced from weeks of care. They navigated the quiet hallways, their conversation flowing easily between past and present. Remember that Christmas? Emily pushed the chair slowly. When you brought me that bicycle? The red one with streamers, Tom nodded. Took me 3 months to save up. I rode it everywhere. Emily's voice softened. Even after I was adopted, it felt like having a piece of you with me. They reached the therapy room. Emily helped Tom onto the parallel bars. I missed you. The words tumbled out as Tom gripped the bars. After you left, kept wondering if you were happy, safe. I was. Emily spotted him as he took careful steps. My adoptive parents were wonderful, but I never forgot you. Tom's legs trembled less today. His steps grew stronger. Look at you go, old man, Emily beamed. You'll be running marathons next week. Watch it with the old man business. Tom completed the exercise. I can still ground you. They laughed together, the sound echoing off institutional walls, transforming them into something warmer. Later, back in his room, Emily sorted through get-well cards from the fundraiser. Mrs. Rodriguez asks about you every time I get coffee. She held up a handmade card. Says your enchilada recipe needs work. That woman's been trying to improve my cooking for 20 years. Tom chuckled. Some battles you just can't win. Emily arranged fresh flowers by his window. Daisies, his favorite. Speaking of food, I brought soup. The good kind, from Chen's. You're spoiling me. Making up for lost time. She uncapped the container, steam rising with familiar spices. They shared the soup, trading stories between spoonfuls. Emily described her medical school adventures. Tom recalled his favorite moments from her childhood visits. You were so determined to become a doctor. Tom set down his spoon. Even then, remember that toy stethoscope? I practiced on all my stuffed animals. Emily smiled. You were my first human patient. Best doctor I ever had. Tom patted her hand. Still are. Afternoon light painted the room gold. Emily checked Tom's vitals one last time before her shift ended. Movements automatic yet tender. Same time tomorrow? She packed her bag. Wouldn't miss it. Tom settled back against his pillows. Bring chapter 2? Always. Emily hugged him carefully, mindful of tubes and wires. Rest well, Uncle Tom. The nickname, unchanged by time, hung in the air between them, a bridge connecting past to present, lost to reunion, broken pieces to healing whole. Tom stood at Emily's front door, his weathered duffel bag at his feet. The 2-story colonial stretched before him, white trim gleaming against deep blue siding. Garden beds burst with spring colors. Welcome home. Emily unlocked the door. Let me help with that. I can manage. Tom reached for his bag, but Emily snatched it first. Doctor's orders, no heavy lifting. She led him inside. Besides, Mark's dying to show you your room. He spent all weekend getting it ready. Emily's husband appeared from the kitchen, dish towel slung over his shoulder. The master chef has arrived. Hope you like lasagna. He's being modest. Emily set down Tom's bag. Mark's lasagna could put Italy out of business. That's quite a claim. Tom shook Mark's hand, looking forward to testing it. Uncle Tom! 6-year-old Sophie barreled down the stairs, pigtails flying. Mom said you're staying forever. Tom caught her mid-leap. That's the plan, Squirt. Come see your room. Sophie tugged his hand. I helped pick the colors. They climbed the stairs slowly, Tom's legs still building strength. The guest room door stood open. afternoon light streaming through bay windows. Tom stopped in the doorway. Fresh paint and warm tan covered the walls. A handmade quilt spread across the bed, its pattern matching the curtains. Photos lined the dresser, old snapshots from his visits to Emily in foster care, recent ones from the hospital, moments captured across decades. "The bathroom's through there," Emily pointed. "We installed grab bars just until you're steadier." "You didn't have to." "Yes, we did." Emily squeezed his shoulder. "You gave me a home when I needed one. Now it's my turn." Sophie bounced on the bed. "Look what else we got you." She pointed to the corner where a familiar worn hardcover sat on the bedside table, the Velveteen Chronicles. "For bedtime stories." Sophie grinned. "Mom says you do the best voices." "That was a long time ago." Tom ran his fingers over the book's spine. "Some things improve with age." Emily winked. "Like your Mrs. Cottontail accent." Mark called from downstairs. "Dinner's ready." The kitchen smelled of garlic and herbs. Tom settled into his chair, already marked as his with a cushion perfectly supporting his back. The hospital nutritionist approved everything. Emily served generous portions, but Mark added extra cheese, doctor-patient confidentiality. "My lips are sealed." Tom took a bite. This really could put Italy out of business. Sophie launched into a detailed account of her day at school, complete with dramatic reenactments. Tom watched Emily across the table, saw how she'd inherited his habit of leaning in when someone spoke, truly listening. "Remember when you used to tell me about your day?" Tom asked during a pause in Sophie's story. "You'd save up every detail between visits." "You never rushed me." Emily passed the garlic bread. "Even when I spent 20 minutes describing playground politics." "The Sarah Jenkins incident of 03. Tom nodded solemnly. "A pivotal moment in sandbox diplomacy." "Mom was a playground politician?" Sophie's eyes widened. "The best." Tom grinned. "She could negotiate peace treaties over who got the good swing." "Is that why you became a doctor?" Sophie turned to Emily. "To help people like Uncle Tom helped you?" Emily met Tom's gaze. "Partly. He showed me how one person's kindness can change everything. I wanted to do that for others." "You were always helping people." Tom's voice softened. "Remember that bird with the broken wing?" "You taught me how to make a splint from popsicle sticks." Emily smiled. "Said sometimes the smallest things make the biggest difference." "Like finding me at the diner?" "Exactly like that." Emily reached across the table, squeezed Tom's hand. One moment of kindness rippled out, changed both our lives. "For the better." Tom looked around the table, at Mark's welcoming smile, Sophie's bright eyes, Emily's steady presence. "Though I never imagined it would lead here. The best things usually surprise us." Mark started clearing plates. "Speaking of surprises, who's ready for dessert?" Sophie bounced in her chair. "Ice cream sundaes." They assembled their sundaes with careful precision. Sophie insisted Tom needed extra sprinkles, for strength. Emily pretended not to notice when Mark slipped him an extra scoop. Later, Tom sat in the living room while Emily helped Sophie with homework. The house settled around him, creaking softly. Photos lined the walls. Emily's graduation, her wedding, Sophie's birth. A new one hung in the center. Tom and Emily in the hospital garden, both laughing at some forgotten joke. "Penny for your thoughts?" Emily joined him on the couch. "Just thinking about that night at the diner." Tom watched Sophie sprawled on the carpet, pencil moving carefully across paper. "How different things might have been if I'd driven past." "But you didn't." Emily curled her legs under her, just like she used to during story time. "You stopped. You cared. Best decision I ever made." "Me too." Emily rested her head on his shoulder. "Though I still say your Mrs. Cottontail accent needs work." "Mom!" Sophie held up her homework. "Can Uncle Tom check my math? He said he's good at fractions." "Better than your mother." Tom winked at Emily. "Remember trying to help you with 7th grade algebra?" "That's why I married an engineer." Emily nudged Mark with her foot as he passed. Had to ensure Sophie got better math genes. They gathered around Sophie's homework, heads bent together. Tom explained fractions using cookie analogies, just as he had with Emily years ago. The evening wrapped around them, warm and secure. Time for bed, young lady. Mark checked his watch. Sophie's eyes lit up. Can Uncle Tom read tonight, please? Tom reached for the Velveteen Chronicles. Only if your mom does the rabbit voices. Deal. Emily settled beside Sophie on the couch. But you have to do Mrs. Cottontail justice. Tom opened the book, words familiar as heartbeats. Chapter 1, in which the youngest rabbit learns about courage. His voice filled the room, mixing with Sophie's giggles and Emily's theatrical whispers. Outside, stars emerged one by one, witnesses to this moment, this family forged from a single act of kindness, strengthened by years, complete at last. If you're enjoying this heartwarming story and want to hear more inspiring and gripping tales like this, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel. Your support helps us bring more stories to life and keeps the magic going. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thank you for being part of this journey.